computer here.
He was one sad stuff from around the way. My life was never easy.
And you're listening to Dumpster Diving with
Janice
and Jane. Welcome, guys. What another fun episode we're gonna have here.
It's the best. This is gonna be a little self-serving, but our audience, I think, knows us well enough by now that they'll expect it. I was just listening to our last episode on self-care. And so I think everybody knows by now that this isn't exactly a high-end production type of situation. That, this is two regular people who have really demanding lives who are trying to like squeeze in a podcast because they feel like they're bringing value. And so it's all low rent. And so, no, we don't actually listen to our episodes before we post them. You get whatever it is that we record.
That's right. It's just as surprises to us or to you as it is to us.
Exactly. It's beautiful. So I was just listening and damn, it was good.
I haven't listened to it, honestly. I haven't had a chance to like go back because I like listening to our podcast on the way to work when it's quiet and everything else. And lately my life has been so chaotic and all over the place and driving extra days and all the extra stuff and taking phone calls. I mean, I've been on more phone calls in the car this week than I have in months. And I haven't really had a chance to like have that download or that decompressed time that I would normally listen to us and kind of
hold on. Things. So you're not engaging in self-care is what I hear you saying. You're not.
Whoa. Okay, hold on. I've caught up. I got my nails did.
That's true. You did. Hold on. Let me set the picture. You guys. Okay. So you need to we need to like take you got to get a picture with the hair like design so we can like include it in some of our posts about this episode because Jane's got this whole like I'm gonna call it Halloween dude just because the shaving on the side of her head looks like a spider web, but it looks amazing. So yes, I love seeing you like put together, not because other times you're not put together, but because I know you've invested in yourself. So love it.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I got a lot of, what's funny is that I actually do this design multiple times throughout the year. Okay. And the only time I get compliments on it is during Halloween time, because apparently it's not appropriate other times of the year.
Right. The rest of the time you're a freak, but this time of year.
Yeah, but this time I am spirited. I am very spirited. Oh, and not to mention, so at my work, AKA Sola Foundation Tech Center, AKA Hogwarts, so we all have our whole team is all broken out into the different Hogwarts houses and stuff like that. And I am the leader of Hufflepuff. And so when I am the leader of something, I take it very seriously. And I'm already the queen bee. I have the tattoo to prove it and everything else. Well, the Hufflepuffs, as you know, are black and yellow. So my whole office is bees and black and yellow. And today I am wearing my Hogwarts Hufflepuff t-shirt with my robe, Hufflepuff robe, hooded robe. And then I am wearing my school bus yellow Chucks. I am out today. I am representing in the House of Houses. So
I saw the Hogwarts stuff and I was like, in my head, I was like, damn, I didn't know she was that big of a fan. Because we are like, our family has that tradition every Christmas through the holidays. We watch all the movies at some point.
I love it.
I had no idea. Very cool. Look at you.
Yeah.
So I was listening and being self-serving and saying I really loved it, but I loved it because it is very much this idea of, like we say in the episode, self-care is so prominent right now, but we take a totally different angle. So that is everything, all that to say to our folks who are listening to this episode, if you skipped the last one, you got to go back because the episode, I think it's episode 8 on self-care, is like freaking amazing. So make sure you go listen to it. But now let's build on, like you're talking about how crazy busy you've been, etc. And this conversation today is going to be kind of a little bit about like starting off with relationships and going into blended families. We've been wanting to talk about blended families for a while now because we know that so many of the folks who are listening in right now have either been a part of a blended family as a kid, are currently an adult parent in a blended family, or at least know somebody who's navigating the waters, if you will, of blending families, which are pretty complex. But let's start off with like just the kind of early part of this, which is relationships, because I know Chris was in town.
Yes,
So,
he was. And it was
know,
lovely.
what's
Yeah, it
going
was
on?
lovely. We had a great time. And he was here from like late Thursday night till early Tuesday morning. So he had a good, 4 or 5 full days with me and the girls and just in my world, right? So I went to go see him back in late August, early September, and spent several days out there. And for me, well, for both of us, it was a really great trip. We got to, learn more about each other and talk and all those things and spend time together, physical time, because that's the first time we met in person.
Right.
And we hit it off. It was great. And for me, when I was there, I was able to relax. I didn't have to worry about anything. I had zero responsibilities. And he
Nice.
was so sweet and like practically serving me. And I'm like, if this is the way my life is going to be, but it's not real.
I like you a lot.
I like you a lot. You're cool. You're super nice. And I've never been treated so well and everything else. And I mean, he is just a doll, but I didn't have my normal day to day. So him coming out here,
Oh yeah.
I was like nervous. I was nervous. And not because not that I was worried about anything between him and I, but you guys, y'all know that I got kids. And I have very strong, independent young ladies as kids in my house right now. My 2 older ones are very strong and independent as well. But these 2 young ladies are my ride or dies. It's been mostly just the 3 of us for the last 10 years, and so, yes, I've had other relationships and stuff like that. But even the relationships I've been in, they weren't that involved. And the girls and I kind of just had our own little gig, and so their opinion matters so much to me. And as if our longtime listeners will know, all of the beginning of season 1, all of my convictions, and about relationships. I have a few, my convictions about relationships and all of those things, and boundaries I set for myself. So when he came out here and in my element, and I was at work and working with the kids and going out with them and taking him with us and starting the blend, right? Like, how is this all going to work? And do they like each other? Stuff like that really fucked with my head. I have to admit, it really, really did, because it wasn't him or the kids. And mind you, my daughters are very protective over me because they've seen the shit that I've gone through, but let's not forget they've been through it too. So they're protective over them and our household and our territory, right? So they are the front line of the doxy den, snarling at the front gate, like, who needs a guard dog when you got 2 very protective daughters, which is so funny. But they protect me like I protect them.
That's right.
And boy, if that isn't, heartwarming and everything else. And just to even further it, last night should I out you right now?
Oh my God. You know what? Fine.
Okay, guys. So my daughter's birthday was on Thursday. She turned 18, Chasey Pants. She's 18. Woo-hoo! So we went out to dinner last night with her friends, and I took them to sushi and stuff like that. And one of her friends was explaining that her parents are on the road a lot, going to her sister's softball games, college softball games. I'm like, did they forget that they have a teenage daughter at home? And she's like, I've never thought about that. I'm like, oh shit. Oh God. Oh, I just coached.
Way to start a pod.
Shut up. Yeah. I'm like, erase everything that I just said. But we were talking, and she was like, actually, it's kind of nice because they're, my older sister's there and it's fine. And it's kind of chill, whatever. And I was like, oh, I'm sure the girls wish I would go away too. And they both went, no, we like you being around. I was like, you guys, they're like, no, we don't like it when you leave. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, sorry guys, I'm the cool mom. They like me. But it was so sweet. But we had a good time and everything. But going back to the weekend trip, I mean, we had a phenomenal time. We went to Six Flags, we went to farmers markets, we went to, did all these things, went to the Bluffs and had a really, really great time. But when he left, I went into a tailspin because I'm like, oh God, because everything's moving fast, you know,
Yeah.
and there was talk of long-term relationship and moving and blending the family and doing all these things.
Okay, hold on though. So all of that talk was happening while he was there, and then when he left, you were kind of like, "Oh shit!" Like,
Yeah,
hold on.
yeah, like it was like the conversations. There was little things dropped here and there, and like, oh,
Yep.
you know, like next spring and this, that, and the other, and I'm like, yeah, going along with it, but like it hit me like a ton of bricks the morning that he was leaving, and I was like, I want him to come back. I want to spend more time with him. I don't not want to ever see him again or anything like that. But I'm like, I'm not ready.
Yeah.
I'm not ready for all of this. And it really dawned on me, like, and my inner coach was knocking on my door going, ding, 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 like, hey, remember all of those convictions you had at the beginning of the year and all of
Right.
those things? Like, remember those because you're not ready. And it fucked with me for a good week, you know? And so, and I let him know immediately. I was just like, look, like I'm having these feelings and thoughts and all of these things. And obviously at first it's more of a reactionary response, an emotional reaction. You know, he was definitely confused because we just had a great weekend. I was confused. I mean,
Yeah.
my own brain, I was like, I don't even know what's going on up here. Like, but I know what it was. It was my inner coach. It was my inner child. It was the person that still needs work that was
Yeah.
like, don't do this to yourself. Don't, because to be honest, I've done this over and over and over again with all my past relationships. I just bite my tongue. I go with it because it feels good. And then because it's easy to do that. But what I don't want, and the reason why I spoke up is I don't, because if this is a long-term thing, if I do it now, it'll end up failing.
Yeah. That's
It
right.
will. I know it will, because that's the cycle.
Matter.
I have to break that fucking cycle. And I've always let things happen before. And I'm finally at the point in my life where I'm like, no, like I really, if this is going to be longevity, you know, and fruitful, like I need to say something now because I'm already starting to feel like turmoil. And if I don't say anything, it's going to be turmoil and it's not going to be good. And people are going to get hurt and it's going to be unfortunate. And so
let me interject really quickly. Two things. First off, so for the folks who are listening, right? You know, Jane is talking in a context of a romantic relationship, and it's a new relationship, as you guys have heard. And again, if you're coming in mid-sentence, you're going to need to go back a couple episodes to catch up. We're not going to repeat it because we need you to download the other episodes. That's why.
just
But
please.
so go catch up. But so you're talking about a romantic relationship, but so much of what you're talking about really also it applies to any kind of relationship, right?
Yes.
Like I'm sitting here thinking to myself about people who come into your lives as friends, etc., right? And just how those boundaries are so important. You've been using the word convictions. I think we're using those two words interchangeably. But back up for just a second though, because you've mentioned the convictions that you kind of made at frankly at the sunset of your last relationship, right? Which was a big relationship, a big commitment. It was a marriage. And you were really clear, and that was early on in our relationship even, you were really clear about, these are some things I've learned and some things I've got to stand by. Remind us about what some of you feel like some of those key ones are, and that way we can relate it to this context with Chris.
So, you know, it more so the bigger ones were just making sure that my partner, my future partner, everybody has some type of hang up. You know, everybody has baggage, and we all do. We're dumpster diving with Janice and Jane. We have this podcast because everybody has a big flaming dumpster fire, right? We know this, but to be truly healthy and or be working on yourself and not trying to control your environment at all times so that way you can navigate it, but actually doing the work that you need to do to be healthy and to love yourself and to do all of those things before you enter into a relationship.
Right.
Because the other person cannot uphold that happiness, and it has to be a balance or a partnership. You know, I'm not gonna be the table and still bring stuff to the table. You know, we have to do it together. And so that was one of my strong convictions, not moving in with somebody right away or in less than a year or
For
two.
a long time.
Yeah, like we gotta date for like a year or two, you know. After a year, then we've kind of, you know, depending on how much time we spent together and depending on where we're at financially and everything else, then we'll figure that out. But I can't I cannot, and on top of that, if I was to move into with somebody, we're both moving out of our old situations into a new situation together.
Right. Yep.
Because I've lived in somebody else's house and blended my family and everything else and felt like a peasant, you know, because it wasn't my house and it wasn't, this is mine and this is mine and this is mine. And then even having my own place and having somebody move into mine, it's not that it was mine, but it's like, I like it the way it is. And now I have somebody else coming in saying, I don't like this stuff, get rid of it. I've had that my whole life. We talked about it in the self-care with the tattoos and like things being taken away from me and stuff like that. That's one thing, like, if I'm working with a partner and we are building this room together, we'll decorate it together. But if I already have it done, I don't need a Budweiser sign in the middle or whatever, like just leave it, you know, just whatever. I don't know. I'm just kind of picky that way. I'm a visual merchandiser. I love that kind of stuff. So, but it's almost just like sharing space. I'm really enjoying not sharing my space, you know?
Like you said,
besides my brother and my sister-in-law. Oh, besides Devin and Shoko. But
yeah, like, holy shit, what does this mean for us? But so not moving in with somebody before a certain period, at least a year or two, like you said, was one thing. I feel like another thing, I'm trying to remember, like another boundary for you really was like, give yourself space to just date, that you don't actually have to go into a relationship,
committed relationship and stuff like that.
Yeah, talk about that.
I mean, and we're dating and we're exclusively dating. We're not like, you know, we're no longer talking about future stuff. We're no longer doing any of that. We're just dating. Right. So, you know, and I'm fine with just dating him, you know, that's fine. So it's, but it's just,
hold on.
What?
I'm going to press on that a little bit. Okay.
You can.
Of course I can, because you're over there and have a big it's about me. So I won't press on it. I'll just put something out there for you to think about, right? Because I'm your older sister, so I get to do that. You might be the coach, but so I want you to think about, I do feel like if I'm remembering correctly, and I might not be remembering correctly, it's all recorded, that one of the things that you did talk about was wanting to explore and just date different people. Now, I know that can always change when somebody comes into your life and you're like, no, I'm actually quite comfortable. And I get that. And if that's where you are with Chris, I love that. That's great. I will put it out there, though, as a reminder to you, right? That one of the things that you did say was like, I have gone from one relationship to another, and I've really not given myself space to just date different people. So I just put that out there to,
Sure. No, you're right. You're right. And you're 100% right. And so, you know, that might be a challenge down the road. I don't know, but right now I'm fine where I'm at and stuff like that. And definitely still processing and all of that fun shit. But for right now, we're just keeping it chill, you know, and honestly, I don't have time to date somebody else right now or anything, you know. I barely have time to do my nails and my hair, let alone.
And it's a significant, what I love about this part of this conversation is that what you said was like, look, he left and all of a sudden I freaked out, right? Because it was like, we had this great weekend, but there was a lot of like hints about long-term stuff, and it made me panic, and it made me remind myself about the convictions and boundaries I had established. And then it sounds like, and then you two had a really good conversation where you came to some agreement about, let's agree on where we are. And it sounds like one of the things you agreed to is, okay, let's just date the two of us for now. So we can kind of invest in this relationship and really see if it's going to be a long-term thing, but also not talk about long-term. And that was kind
of at all. Yeah, like at all. Hold on one second.
How to get Mirror from Anthony's computer or Antonio's computer.
Conference one.
Conference one.
Yeah. Does he have an Apple?
So it's on his laptop where he should hit the button mirror, right? Not on the screen.
Okay. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Like, given how crazy your life is, like, of course, it makes so much sense actually that you're just gonna focus on one person. And again, like I said, like, you know, boundaries, it's on one hand, we talk about boundaries in terms of like, you know, set a boundary and stick to it, right? But real life is set a boundary and constantly evaluate it. And so what I'm saying is that you evaluated it with this new context, and you feel like right now makes a lot of sense, right? To focus on relationship, especially because I know you're like, you got all kinds of crazy things going on from a work perspective.
Yes. I'm super busy here at the nonprofit, and I'm working on, I'm helping teach a young adult coaching or workforce development class where I'm teaching leaders or professional development and leadership skills and consultative sales, and they're growing and thriving, and we have 2 more weeks left, and it's super exciting. I love these kids, they're super awesome.
Yeah.
And then not to mention just Chase and Genevieve, and then handling all of their stuff and making sure I'm at the right spot to pick up, and from LA to an hour north. And so there's just a lot going on. So more than anything, I see Chris as a, he's turning into a best friend. We've developed a really great relationship, and I do love him, and he's an amazing person and is such a good person. So I'm like, why would I throw that all away if I'm not in the headspace for it now? Like, we'll just continue building our relationship and see what happens and stuff like that. So that's what we're doing. And I love that because after the initial reaction, the response was, and after conversations and stuff like that, we're on common ground, and he totally understands and respectful of my boundaries and the growth that I need to have and the time that I need to have. And he has tons of patience, and I appreciate that. So, and I've never had somebody in my life that's been so normal, like that could handle stuff and like not take it super personally. Yeah. Well, you're normal, yes, but and it's and normal's not even what I desire, but you know what I mean, like somebody that's rational and that can actually, yes, he needs time to process too, and yes, we have those emotional reactions, but he understands and he gets it, and he's patient, and he's like, look, like, you're it for me, and we're not going to talk about that now, but like, we'll just figure it out. And I'm like, okay, we'll just figure it out.
And based on how you describe some things, I feel like what's really special is that he cares for and about you, right? Like, and so takes care of you, right? And we all, like, that's something that's incredibly important for all of us, right? To have those people in our lives who do that. And I really value the fact that he can acknowledge that he feels very strongly in terms of, can already think about the long term, but is respectful enough to recognize that, okay, if that's where you are, that's wonderful. Right. But whether that takes us a year, 5 years, 10 years to get to, shouldn't matter if that's where you are. And it should be okay to come at your pace, right? For him to come at your pace. So that's great. I mean, that shows obviously a lot of maturity, right? Right. And that you can both think about it in that way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, more so for me than anything, it was being in my environment and the stress that I have going on. I mean, we have a very active household. We have pets and we have kids and we have in and out, and we have 4 adults or 3. Yeah, 4 adults now that Chase is 18, like 4 adults going back into and from work and school and everything else. And it's a lot. And I don't get a lot of downtime. I really don't. Like, there's always something that I'm getting up for doing. I don't get hours just to lay around and do nothing. And so I take my little moments and try to appreciate them. But it was the thought process, because, I mean, if we're going to really talk about blended families, you and I both are blended family experts at this point, I think. Like, I've been, you guys, we all know that Jane's been married 4 times. We get it. Okay. We're done talking about it. So anyway,
how many times? 4. Okay, 4.
So anyways, and
I gotta get my ass
glad
here, by the way. I'm 2 behind. So I've got
catch up. Sorry, Joe. She's got some catching up to do.
Look, babe, it's not personal.
Well, hold on. You could have sister wives.
I'm completely thrown off guard by that. I have no idea what the hell you're talking.
You don't know what sister wives are?
I'm thinking like, yes, I do, but I'm thinking about it in the context of like multiple wives for one husband. No, that's not my game.
That's not. Oh, okay. Okay.
I know it seems like I would be right there on that and like all over that, but I'm just not. Yeah, it's just not my. I'm a one-on-one kind of gal. So
okay. And frankly, nothing like our father.
Nothing like our father. And I don't like to wait my turn. So, that's just not for me.
And I don't like sharing. I'm not a big sharer either. Exactly. Certain things I don't share.
But you said it. We are, part of the reason. So as we're shifting now from digging into Jane's relationship and to the broader topic of blended families, part of the reason we wanted to put that out there is because, and we're going to be doing, the next episode is going to be more holiday related. So we're not going to go down the road really of holidays, but holidays always do make us start to really evaluate and think about our own families, etc. And like I said at the top of the episode, right? So many of us are either in situations where we're, fostering blended families, or we've been a part of as a kid, or whatever it is. And so it made sense to us as a precursor to the holiday family episodes to think about, like, what does it start to look like, right? When you're early on in a relationship and you see that it's going to be long-term and there are children involved. How do you begin to think about the integration of those two families even early on? And I think this came from this conversation, right? This idea that you're early on in a relationship that we're not talking long-term about, but
Right.
if hypothetically, put Chris aside, right? Your next long-term relationship, it might be Chris, who knows, whatever. But just thinking about, like, the different way you have to approach a relationship when you have kids, right? So start us off right there, and then I can add in. But just starting us off, like, whether you try, doesn't even have to be in the moment. It could be like your past marriages, right?
Yeah.
Like, but like when you had to, when you begin to think about how to blend, right, because of kids being involved.
I have a confession.
Oh God, here we go. Let's hear it.
Here's Jane's dumpster. I never put a lot of thought into it before.
Oh, wow.
I didn't.
I love that about you. I love that you just said that out loud, because a lot of people would not want to say that out loud. So good for you.
No, that's the cold, hard, honest truth, is that I really didn't put a lot of thought into it. I was more caught up in my own bullshit and the need to feel like I needed somebody, that, not codependency, because I could always do everything on my own and stuff like that, but just needing to be loved.
Yeah.
And that's why I've been married so many times. I love love, I really do. And that's been the hardest thing for me in, the whole going through a divorce with my ex-wife and stuff like that is, and even with her, I didn't, put a lot of thought into it. I was like, look, they're a good person. They get along. They're super nice. My kids will love them. They'll love them, and stuff like that. And I honestly didn't take my kids in consideration when, or their feelings. It was just kind of like, this is what we're doing. And that is a direct thing from my mom. It's just like, it is what it is. And this is what's going to make me happy and move on and whatever. And not until after, like, I was better at it with my ex-wife, but not as good as I should have been. And that's why I need to be really good at it now. Amen. Because I am so aware, and I don't want to have a relationship with my kids that I have with my mom, because not that I just have boundaries with her. I'm not batshit crazy. Sorry. I hate to say that, but I'm just not. I'm not batshit crazy.
Can we take a quick poll, listeners? If you think she's batshit crazy, never mind. Sorry.
You might think I'm batshit crazy, but I'm not. No, I really didn't. And I have to be honest with myself about that. And so the fact that I didn't, and that's why I have such strong convictions and boundaries now, is because I do care about what my daughters think about me. I do care that they know that I love them and that I do take them in consideration. And it's so much stronger now because I have empowered my daughters to talk to me about these things. I have. I've told them over and over again, I want you to talk to me. And so I actually had to have a conversation with Chase recently, and it was about the holidays and stuff like that, which we can get into later. But she felt very strongly about a decision that I made. And I told her, thank you for telling me. And I said, I'm going to change the plan. And she's like, why? And I said, because it's important to me that you are comfortable. And if you're not comfortable, I'm going to change the direction of what we're doing. Because your comfort level is more important to me than me furthering a relationship with somebody that isn't going anywhere, and that has said, whatever, and I'm not going anywhere. We're going to do this, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. Well, if they're not going to go anywhere, and if they're not going to do anything, I can say these things and I'm not worried anymore. And if that person doesn't like it, then they can go, because these are my kids.
Well, and think about that. What a growth piece for you, right? Because I remember, right after the split with your ex-wife, um, you had a lot of revelations with your kids, right? About
And we
how they
talked.
felt about those relationships, how and not there were plenty of good things, by the way,
Oh
lots
yeah,
of
yeah,
good
yeah,
things, but that there were some underlying struggles on their part that you didn't necessarily realize or recognize. And what you're just saying makes that it all makes sense now, right? It all makes sense if you went into relationships in the past in that way. So it had to have been really it doesn't surprise me with that in mind, it doesn't surprise me that Chase's reaction was to be surprised that you would make a change for her,
right.
because her experience in the past was like everybody's going to get on board and be fine, and everybody was fine,
Everybody was fine,
but
but not great,
exactly,
but not great, and not 100% happy, and going through their own shit because of it, and not being vocal about it. I've worked so hard on my two youngest kids. I didn't get this much. I didn't get this kind of. I wasn't this person. I wasn't the same mom with my two older kids. They got more of the emotional reactionary mom and stuff like that. And so I'm very thoughtful. I'm very, I've definitely, my personality has changed. And so it's important to me. And I love the relationship that I have with all of my kids. But the ones with Chase and Genevieve is because we're so much closer, because we spent so much time together and all these things. And I'm a different mom now. And so I don't want to fuck that up. And no relationship is worth fucking up the relationship with my kids if I
well,
can't.
because the relationship with your kids is the one that lasts.
Yeah.
Any relationship could, right? But in my mind, it's like a parental responsibility. We brought them into this world. They didn't ask.
They did not ask for this shit.
And so
right.
at the very least, right? So so it's interesting because and I can't really explain the why behind kind of why I have operated the way that I have, right? In terms of blending a family. And maybe it just comes from the expertise of like
Being an
supporting
educator.
so many families, right? As an educator, supporting thousands of families gives you I've seen a lot of shit, right?
Right.
And so when going through my divorce, obviously for my two biological girls, I say that like that because for those of you who've been listening, Joe and I have 6 kids. They are our kids. But there were 2 that I brought into the relationship. And, they were middle school, older elementary school when he and I started dating. And we actually, the divorce was hard enough. I mean, there are some, the day that their dad and I sat them down to tell them we were getting a divorce is seared into my memory and is one of the worst days of my life. And that moment, I think, is in part what drove me to recognize that moving forward from that moment, like everything we couldn't make any decisions, right, that didn't put them first, right? And their dad and I have done a really, really great job of that. And it's been hard in its own way for both of us. But when Joe and I started dating, we actually, he has 4 kids and again, now they're kind of all ours. And I keep repeating that because it always strikes me a little bit. I always have a little pang of like, oh, this sucks when somebody in a blended family talks about his and her kids, right? Or her and her, like that always just makes me kind of like,
you're explaining a story, so give yourself a fucking break. Like, chill. It's okay.
So that's the way it is. Anyway, so when we started dating, we actually dated for a really long time before we introduced each other to our kids, because we, with his 4, the youngest, Cammie, was super, super young. The older 2 were graduating from high school or had graduated. They were, older. And then my 2 were the ages they were. And we just said, we're not doing anything until we know this is permanent. And so for both of us, and we talked earlier in earlier episodes about marriage, but for both of us, we kind of had said, we had said, like, if we knew from the get-go, like immediately we knew this was it, right? Like this was long-term, this was forever. And if we hadn't had young children, we probably would never have gotten married, but we knew that eventually, right? Like he was in the Navy, he was going to be given different orders, he was going to have to go. And that was going to be the defining moment for us. Like, are we doing it or aren't we? Right. And we said we were. So we actually dated for quite a while. And even before we introduced them, like we dated for a while before we talked about it out loud to our kids. And then we dated for a while talking about it to our kids. And then eventually we started to introduce. So it was a really, like, we had probably dated a year before we introduced each other to our kids, because we were not, we were so cautious about making sure neither one of us wanted to introduce our kids to people that we didn't think were forever, right? Because
Right.
we just, I've seen it happen, and it can be really hard for kids to have different adults coming in and out of their lives. And I remember when we decided to get married, and like I said, in part that's because he was going to be moved, and we knew, right? We knew we were going to be asking for my two to come with, and that there was no way I could do that without being married. Like, we needed to be married for that. And so, you know, we moved to the Pac Northwest for his first duty station. My two were able to come be physically with us. Our youngest two on his side, you know, were with their mom in California. And then of course the older two were, you know, doing their thing. But from the moment we got married, like, it was all about how we blend it, right? Early on, when we started to introduce the kids, it was about how we did, you know, little easy, like, oh, a day here at King's Dominion. Oh, now we're going to do an overnight in Virginia Beach where he was, you know, stationed. Oh, now we're going to do, little bits at a time. And we created lots of opportunities for me to be with him and his youngest two, and then him to be with me and my two separately. So they had lots of different ways to kind of begin to form.
Good.
And it wasn't, by any stretch, it wasn't perfect, right? And I know my girls really struggled with it. It's hard for kids of divorce to see their parents get married again. It just is, right? Because they always have that little dream that maybe their parents will reunite, you know, that's
together.
always there, right? And so, but the blending of the family really came down to, at its core, 100% every decision being about what's going to be best for them, what's going to make it
Right.
easier for them, what's going to be the thing that helps them deal with it. But you guys, I got, like, seriously, like, I was so OCD about it that when we had our first home together, first off, we've always made sure that the youngest four, regardless of who was living with us full time or not, had a bedroom.
Yep.
Right. Even if all they did was spend 1 week in the summer and every holiday with us,
They need their own space.
they had their own space, they had their own stuff, they had their own whatever. That was the first thing. The second thing was making sure that, like, and if you look around our home, any home we've had since we got married, I always made sure there was equal representation of the kids there, whether it was their stuff, pictures. Like, if you looked around, you saw exactly the same number of pictures of each kid as you saw the other kids. Like, it was so important to us to make sure that the kids who weren't living with us in the moment, when they came to be with us, didn't feel like
it was a foreign home.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. They didn't feel like the cast-offs who just showed up once in a while. And the other thing we did was really, frankly, invested a lot of our income early on for travel to children, right? The very first year we were married, we were in California. And so we actually had our youngest two, from Joe's side with us half the time because their mom was there, but my two stayed in Virginia. So I would be back in Virginia 2 weeks a month, and then in California 2 weeks a month for a year. And
oh my gosh,
make it work for our kids, right? And for us to then begin to, you know, to continue to deepen our own relationship. And then when we moved up to Washington, it was my two, if you will, and his youngest two were in California, so they were the ones who came to visit. So those are just some really simple, and it seems probably like superficial examples, but I got to tell you, they made all the difference, because they were the things that put the we behind it, right? So that it was never his and hers, it was always ours. And those were some of the things that made it ours, right? So that the kids felt equally valued, if you will.
Right. And I love that. And I love that it's, you know, it's still going, and you guys are so in love and all those things. And I adore Joe. He's so sweet. But let's call a spade a spade. You actually had an active partner with on the same page and all of those 100%. Things to make that happen and to make it come to fruition. Now, you know, where Cammie's she's 16 right now.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. She's almost on the edge of that nest, you know, and going to college and doing those things. But it took both of you to work towards that.
Oh, 100%.
My situations are very opposite of that. So, you know, my first experience with a, you know, quote unquote blended family, if we're talking about where we have both sides coming with kids, or even just one with kids and one without, you're still blending a family.
Still
There's a lot of dynamic you need to learn and be open to, and patience is the virtue, you know, is and all of those things. But you know, in my situations, my first situation, we had 7 kids. He had 4, I had 3.
Yeah.
And wow, was that an experience? And come to find out, you know, I was very, and I think I've talked about this before, like I was very man, I got sold on this guy. I got sold like a cheap suit. Like I was like, it was a cheap suit. I could just say that now. It was a damn cheap suit. But I learned a lot from that relationship, and I learned a lot about seeing red flags and from a mile away instead of 2 feet in front of me, and a lot of behavioral things. And I ended up being the like live-in babysitter. You know, it was like, oh, you're here now, bye. You know, and it was smoking mountains of weed in the backyard, not paying attention to what's going on, kids having food fights in the house, and like total chaos and disrespectful and all of those things. And I got zero support from him. So I was a disciplinarian. I was the new lady, the disciplinarian, and they did not give a shit, you know. And here are my kids, like I have well-behaved kids and stuff like that. And it was chaos. It was chaos. Yeah. And then rightfully so, because he wasn't maintaining his side of the bargain. You know, it was the responsibility was put on me, and I was working 60 to 70 hour weeks and everything else. So it was crazy, but there was a whole another couple layers of why that relationship didn't work. But that was a big one. You know, I was an instant babysitter, you know, and it was crazy. You know,
but pick away at that a little bit. I think you identified the really key thing there, and that is that going into it, like looking back, you weren't surprised, because going into it, right?
We had no discussions of how we were going to run the house or anything like that. It was just
partnership. There was no
there was no support. Anything that I laid down, it was like, oh, you don't need to do that. But then anything he would say, like he would just start screaming or just go in the backyard and get high or drunk and not worry about anything. And he would literally be sitting at the dining room table on World of Warcraft with headphones on, and they're literally having a food fight around him, and he's just ignoring it. And I'm just like, this is insane. Like I blended into a 3-ring circus. Like this is crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I joined a circus, and you're bringing up another really, I think, good point for us to think about, and that is like the parent, like and again, clearly in the conditions that you're talking about. What type of
parent are they?
Some discussion was had about co-parenting, but we had a lot of conversations, and because we dated for a while before we introduced to ourselves to each other's kids, and then after that another long period of time before we got married, we had plenty of time to both practice and think about co-parenting, because early on, I have a very I don't yell. Right? I grew up in a household where everybody yelled. I grew up in a household where people were hit. I grew up, in a craziness. And so I knew, my own belief system is that kids can learn about life without yelling, and they can learn about life without hitting. And our children are evidence of that, right? So it's like, I was just in a conversation, a bit of a bird walk, but I was just in a conversation a few weeks ago, and the group I happened to walk up to who were chatting, we're talking about a young parent who was like, I just had to spank my kid for the first time. And I could tell he had a lot of angst about it. Like, it's not like he was bragging about it, right? He had a lot of angst. And so it was an interesting conversation, because we're, chatting, and then it kind of came to me, and I said, well, I've never hit my kids. I've never hit my kids, and my kids are fine. Right. So and I always say, like, okay, to each his own, like, whatever. I'm not here to try and preach or get somebody else to think about doing something differently. I just can say by my own experience that kids can learn about life without being yelled and screamed at, and without being hit. So with that in mind, Joe has come from backgrounds where there's yelling, right? And so, and not like yelling at kids and screaming at them and being horrible and humiliating to them, but raising the voice and, using that almost like
discipline or authority.
Exactly.
Yeah, the authoritative.
One of the things that I love about him is he has been so wonderful about like coming to understand other ways of going out. Because first time I heard him raise his voice, it was literally at the computer, right? He was like trying to fix the computer, and he was like, he had this burst of just like, oh, like everybody knows those moments.
Yeah.
And I was like literally sitting across the room doing something totally different. And I remember looking over him and I was like, if you ever do that in front of my children, we will never be able to get married because they will be terrified of you and they will never be able to live in the same home with you. But we were able to have a conversation where, you know, and he ultimately kind of got to like, you know, when I was growing up, my mom yelled, right? And he said, and so, yes, I know. And his, you know, sisters and siblings have all kind of talked about that. But so I know that's where it comes from. But my point in all that is to say, you know, co-parent, like discussing before you get, you know,
Yes,
before you
yes.
even spend a lot of time with each other's kids about co-parenting is so important because you have to really understand each other's boundaries, right? Like what you're not okay with, what the other person is not okay with, and then kind of come to some agreement about how we're going to parent together. Because it couldn't be like, okay, you discipline your kids and I'll discipline mine. Otherwise, that's a his and hers. It's not an ours, right?
Right,
So
right.
really had to, and that was not easy. Like, you
That's
know,
not easy. And it's
not
not even, it's not scalable. And and then there's divide, you know, now you're parenting in silos and
Exactly.
that's not good for the goose is not good for the gander
yeah.
and all of those things, you know, and so, but that's so important. So with my second situation,
Yeah.
you know, I had 4, he had 3. So now
Right.
it's opposite numbers, you know, so again, Brady Bunch plus 1, you
Plus
know,
one, maybe.
and this relationship lasted a lot longer. However, his kids were older, and when we met, Genevieve was about 15 months old, and he knew this, but
Right.
he was quote unquote done raising kids. So all of a sudden it was, I've raised my kids, my youngest is 10, he's almost out of here, you know, whatever, that's your deal. However, I'm still going to tell you what you should be doing and how you should be doing it. And I'm still going to, you know, scream in your child's face. And I was like, no, that's, I mean,
Oh,
the moment that he screamed in Chase's face about a water bottle being on the kitchen island, I was like, this is
yeah.
needs to stop. And I need to start planning this out right now because
Yep.
my daughter is now in the line of this person that obviously doesn't have any love for my children. You know, if
Right.
you can treat my children like that, and then, I mean, there was a lot of favoritism, you know,
Yep.
we also agreed everybody had to have a bedroom and all those things,
Yeah.
but that only applied to his kids. My
Mhm.
kids, it was like the 2 girls are sharing a room and then maybe the other one will get a room, but we can't afford it. So, but my kids all have rooms, you
Yeah.
know, and so again, like, you know, my daughters, they didn't, it just wasn't fair. You know,
Yeah.
it wasn't fair when it came down to the kids and in their view, it wasn't fair.
Yeah.
And you know, we started going to the same church and the kids started going to that school and all of those things. I did everything that I could have done to blend and to try to set boundaries and all of those things. I just had an unwilling participant again.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and this unwilling participant wanted me, but not what comes with me, which is my
That's right.
kids. And I'm like, you know, this is not scalable. It's never going
Yeah.
to work, you know. And then and I started training to be a coach, and
Yeah.
I started working on myself and all of these things. And he was very much so fixed mindset to where I'm good. I'm an asshole. I've always been an asshole, and I always will be an
That's
asshole.
how it's
Right?
gonna be. Right.
Yeah. So
That
here
has
I am. I'm an asshole. Great.
right.
That's fine. But I'm not okay with you being an asshole, and I'm not okay being married to an asshole, and I'm not okay with an asshole talking to my kids. So
Exactly.
that's where I'm going to say au revoir and get the fuck out of here because this is not conducive to my new perception on life and
Yeah.
my new perception on myself and my new perception on my kids and how it's affecting them and everything else. And from that moment, I was like, I need to move forward. So, you know, when I went into the relationship with my ex-wife, like they didn't meet, we you know, we were talking on the phone for several months and stuff like that and all those things. And but it was like one of those instant things. But I was also excited. I just came out of the closet. I was going into a new relationship with a woman. There all of these things. And I think I needed to go through that to get to this point to where it's like, okay, none of that is worth it. I have all the time in the world. I
Yep.
don't need somebody by my side because every time I've had somebody by my side, with the exception of now, because Chris is amazing, they've drugged me down, and it's always been an agenda and everything that I need to change about myself or whatever. And I'm done doing that. I'm done. I want somebody to love me for who I am, and then I can grow into an even better person that they love even more, not tell me all the things I need to change and what my kids need to change and stuff like that. And then everything will be fine. I'm done changing for everybody else. I'm ready for somebody just to love me the way I am, and for all my flaws and everything else.
Well, and what's powerful too is, again, current relationship aside, regardless,
Right.
Chase is now in college. Jenny is finishing up middle school this year. Like, you're in this unique place where in 4 short years, 5 years, right?
I'm done, baby.
Youngest children will be adults. And so, yeah. I mean, you can ask yourself, like, can I wait that long to end up in the next relationship where somebody moves in, somebody does all, because then my kids are done, right? Like,
right. That's exactly where I'm at. And that's why at the, season 1, I'm like 5 years. Yeah. Jenny will be 13 this summer, 5 years. Yep. And I'm still on that road. I really want that freedom. I really want the ability to just live, and the fact that I've met somebody that's wonderful, still doesn't change the fact that maybe I do need to date more people. Maybe I do need to get out there. Maybe I do need to do those things. But right now, where I'm at, he's a great, like, we're good. We're cool, and I don't know what the future is going to bring.
There's no question that you're in a good space, right?
Yeah.
And that's right.
And that's all that matters right now. And nothing serious. Great.
Exactly. So, we've covered a lot. We've covered a lot of ground, you guys, in the last hour or so. But as always, our intention is to bring our own experiences to bear, because we know that so many, if not every single person listening right now, can relate to them in some way and help, open up our own dumpsters, show them for what they are, right? And then hope that adds something to you as a result of having spent the time with us. And the one last thing I'm going to say about the whole blended family thing, and there's so many more conversations to have about parenting and relationships and all the things, is that none of it is, as much as I kind of distilled in this conversation down to some really simple things, none of it is simple and none of it is easy. But at the core is making the decision that there's a balance to be struck, because on one hand, you're fostering this new romantic relationship, obviously, with someone. But likewise, on the other, is that when you bring kids into it, they have to be first in terms of making sure that you make decisions that are going to ensure that they're okay, right?
Yeah.
So again, like I said, none of it's easy and none of it's simple, but it's all worth it. And when you take it step by step and you slow it down, right? And that would be my last word of advice, right? My last word of advice to wrap up the episode, Jane, and then you can offer your last words.
Yeah.
My last word of advice is that when in doubt, slow it the fuck down. Yeah. I don't care what it is, whether it's the relationship with the new person, whatever it is, when in doubt, slow it the fuck down. And if slowing it down, you feel like it's going to cause something negative to happen, you should probably be reevaluating it, period.
Right.
Because anything that needs to be rushed, in my opinion and my experience, should be suspicious, right? It should be
100%. 100%. And what I would add to that, you guys, is, there's so much I want to add to it, but I'll say this: slow it down. I'm going to piggyback on that, but also make sure they love you for who you are.
Amen.
And make sure that they're going to uphold that. And that doesn't mean like, oh, in a month we're getting married because he loves me just the way I am, or she loves me just the way I am. No. You have to give it at least a year. See how they're travel with them, see how they work outside of their normal aspects. I learned a lot from my ex-wife when I traveled with her for the first time. Yeah. Holy shit balls. I'm like, I will never fly with you again. Yeah. Like OCD, all those things, and she can't help it, whatever. But it's just like, that was such a stressful thing for me. Traveling in the car was stressful for me. Really, a lot of things were stressful, but I didn't know those things about her before we just dove in head first. And now I see it affecting my kids, and I see this and I see that. So yes, take the time spending with that person, get to know them before you introduce them with your kids. But then once you do, pay attention to your child's emotional responses to their behavior, because I noticed that. And that's because that's their true reaction. That's their true fear, feelings, whatever. And kids will not tell you the truth because they don't want to tell you what you don't want to hear, you know.
Amen.
And they'll protect you. They'll just be yes men. They'll just, oh, yeah, it's fine until it's not. And
That's
then by the time it's not, it could be too late.
That's
You
right.
know, it could be too late, and you could have had already ruined that relationship. I've been very fortunate and been talking to my kids for years now, and getting this stuff out and understanding how they felt during those processes and everything else. And I've learned so much from them on how to manage future relationships, because it sprouts with me. It starts at the top, you know. And so just the, you know, word to everybody out there, take your time, get to really know the person, like really know them, look into them, do all those things. But then also just please pay attention to your emotional responses from your children, because that would be your thermometer on how they're feeling, and then give you the opportunity to have a good talk with them and understand where they're coming from. And you may have to make adjustments in your relationship because of what your kids need or want.
Amen. I love it. Beautiful. Okay.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
And as always, in the notes of this episode is our email address. If you have a response to the conversation we had today and you'd like to add it into the conversation, we will take your email. We will bring it up in a future episode, and our email address is buried right there in the notes of this podcast. So make sure you like, subscribe, share, do all the things.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you guys for being with us, man. We always appreciate the gift of time that you give us.
Yes, and happy spooky season. Woo!
Peace out, everybody.
Started in my cutlass clutching heat like it's an open oven, puffing chronic.